Hello, we're connected. Almost ready to start. Just wait for the top of the hour. So we've got a few people waiting already. Okay, let's go. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. So we have been talking about the Four Noble Truths, and we've dealt with the first three. I'm going to break up the Noble Eightfold Path into at least three talks. I haven't decided exactly, but I thought the topic of the first path factor, right view, is big enough that it can be dealt with on its own, sufficient for a single talk. First, a word or two about the path factor in general. The fourth truth is the noble truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering, and the Buddha advised us with this one to follow it or practice it. The path factors are all in English, we call them right view, right thought or intention, right action, etc. The word in Pali is samma, and right is perhaps slightly off in connotation. Samma is not really right as opposed to wrong. It means perfect. In the sense of complete or flawless. So ditthi, the first path factor, samma ditthi, right view. The word view is actually quite a good translation for ditthi, because like the English word, it has a double meaning depending on context. When we say view in English, we could mean view what you see with your eyes, like the view out the window. But it also means the way we understand things, like what is your view on this or that? What and it almost means opinion. And ditthi in Pali is used also in the mundane sense as meaning the object of eye consciousness, but it also has this deeper meaning of view is how we understand things. And it's actually a bit deeper than opinion, which is relatively superficial. Our opinions come out of our views, and they're much more superficial and fluid, whereas a view is our underlying bias in seeing the world and understanding the world. Clinging to views is one of the defilements. It's upadana. Ditthi upadana is one of the forms of clinging to views, and it's a particularly pernicious state of mind where you're rigidly adhere to a view and dogmatically grasp it. And the Buddha said even his teachings can be held in that incorrect way, and then will become a source of trouble. There's an analogy given like kusa grass. Kusa grass being a tough, fibrous grass that grows in India. That it's very useful for thatching roofs and like that. But if it's picked up with the bare hand the wrong way, you can cut your hand on it. So there's a verse: kusa grass when wrongly grasped doth cut the hand. Just like the perfect view of the Buddha, if it's grasped as a dogmatic adherence, then it will cause more harm than good. Another thing before moving on to right view proper, another thing we could say about views generally is that it's important to recognize that we always have some kind of view. If someone had no view, it would be really quite idiotic. But the idea is to hold your views lightly. And there are in the Digha Nikaya a couple of parables that have the same message, that one should not adhere to views rigorously. One of them is, I'll just very briefly summarize it, that there's two men who are on a journey and they pass through an abandoned village and they come across some piles of straw, and they say, oh, this straw would be very useful for our animals back home. Let's take some straw. So they make bundles of straw and put it on their heads, Indian fashion, and carry on. And a little later on, they come across some firewood sticks, and the one guy says, "Oh, the firewood sticks are actually more useful than the straw." And he throws the straw away and picks up the firewood sticks. And the other fellow says, "I've been carrying this straw a ways now. I think I'll stick with it." "Okay, suit yourself." And as they go along, they keep finding more and more valuable things: bolts of cloth, and then bars of copper, then of silver and gold, and finally precious. And the one guy is very eager each time to throw away his previous burden and pick up the more valuable one. And the other guy is more and more attached to the straw the further he's carried it. He says, "I've already carried this for miles. It seemed like a waste to throw it away now." And they get back to their village, and the one man has some straw for his donkey and his goat, and the other fellow has precious jewels that makes him a wealthy man for the rest of his life. And the Buddha explicitly relates this to the holding and relinquishing of views. Now, it's a subtlety that might be missed in this, is the Buddha doesn't say that the wise thing to do is to return to the village empty-handed. So if you think that the ideal state is to have no views, that's not really what the Buddha said. But to hold your views provisionally and lightly and be ready to change them with new information or with a deeper understanding. People get fixed and rigid in their views and become very reluctant even to process information that contradicts their previous views. And this is a cause of much confusion and suffering. Now, right view is a path factor, sammaditthi. Of course, then the immediate and important question is what is the content of right view? And this question is answered in various ways in different places in the Sutta Pitaka. In the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, which is the source for, or the Dhammacakka Sutta, which is the source for the Four Noble Truths, the definition is given that right view is the view of the noble truth of suffering, the noble truth of the origin of suffering, the noble truth of cessation of suffering, and the noble truth of the path. So it becomes a kind of a circular definition. The right view refers back to the Four Noble Truths. And this is elsewhere given as a common definition for right view. Right view is adhering to the formula of the Four Noble Truths, or understanding the world through the lens of the Four Noble Truths. This is a right view. Elsewhere, right view is given as the middle way between annihilationism and eternalism. And this is a common formula with some variations and some nuances in different places, but the idea is that there are two extreme views. Eternalism, which is the view of an eternal abiding entity, and it usually involves, in most iterations, it involves the idea of a creator God. And the other view is, on the other extreme, is annihilationism, which is what we would call philosophic materialism, the view that nothing exists except matter in motion, and human beings are meat machines. And these are considered the two extreme views. The Buddha said that falling into eternalism comes from not seeing the cessation of objects, and falling into annihilationism results from not seeing the origination of objects. But one who sees both origination and cessation falls in the middle path, which is the way of the dependent origination. In the first sutta of the Digha Nikaya, there's perhaps the most extensive examination of wrong views. There's this is the Brahmajala Sutta, and there's a listing of 62 wrong views. And it's often thought that this is a kind of a artificially constructed matrix to cover all kind of philosophic positions. But the author Ajahn Taleka, in the book Early Buddhist Theory of Knowledge, which is a very interesting book, he identified many, not all, but many of these 62 views with specific schools of Indian philosophy. So his thesis is that the Buddha was actually addressing existent schools of philosophy. And of these 62 wrong views, the great majority fall into variations of either eternalism or annihilationism. The one important exception is what's called the eel wriggler's view. It's given a dismissive and a kind of comic name because the Buddha's attitude to it was rather dismissive. This would be what we would call agnosticism. It's a view that the person adhering to this says, I don't know, I can't know, who knows, you know. And it's said that one adheres to this view out of either cowardice or stupidity. So the Buddha had a very low opinion of the agnostic approach. Which again comes back to the idea of having no view is kind of, it doesn't really work. It's not really something to be sought for, but to hold a view, hold it lightly. You need a framework in order to understand things. And this is your view. So we have right view is either the Noble Eightfold Path, or another definition is the middle path between annihilationism and eternalism, taking the stand on the dependent origination or causation. Another definition of right view is seeing the three characteristics, selflessness or emptiness, impermanence, and suffering or imperfection. So these are all types of right view. Then there's also a formula that sometimes is called mundane right view, to distinguish it from particularly the first one we covered, the right view of the Four Noble Truths, which emerges in the end as part of the Eightfold Path. It emerges into nibbana, whereas the mundane right view is on the plane of basically on the plane of ethics. It occurs in which would lead only to a better rebirth. It doesn't necessarily lead out of samsara, but it's kind of a provisional or a meritorious view to hold if one is not wise enough to hold a higher view. And it occurs in the formula of, in the context of the 10 courses of right action, which is a statement of ethics. And then it's basically the 5 precepts plus the right thought and right speech, broken down further. So here's the formula for right view here. He has right view, undistorted vision thus. There is what is given and what is offered and what is sacrificed. There is fruit and result of good and bad action. There is this world and the other world. There is mother and father. There are beings who are reborn spontaneously. There are good and virtuous recluses and Brahmins in the world who have themselves realized by direct knowledge and declare this world and the other world. So most of this revolves around the idea of karma and rebirth, that ordinary or mundane right view is to hold, to see that there are results of good and bad actions. There is karma and fruit of karma, and one can be reborn according to the fruit of one's karma in this world or the other world, meaning the Deva realm. So this is a fundamental or elementary level of right view, and notice it doesn't reach to the point of seeing emptiness or seeing selflessness. It's still expressed in terms of persons, but it is a basis for a moral or ethical life, which is the basis for the entire practice. Now one sees consequences in good and bad actions. So there are these various definitions of right view, and they're sometimes divided into mundane and super mundane. Mundane being the one I just spoke about, and super mundane being a right view onto the fundamental nature of reality. Either it's expressed in either the formula of the Four Noble Truths or the 3 characteristics or the dependent origination. And there are other variations on this. Now, right view is put, samaditi is put right at the head of the eightfold path, because it's the foundation really for everything else. It's not to be thought that the 8 path factors are like a ladder, one after the other. It's said, the analogy is given in the Visuddhimagga, Magga, it's better thought of like an 8-stranded rope. So it's not, right view is not given priority in terms of time. It's not like you have to have right view before you practice the other things, but it's given priority as the first factor, in that it's absolutely fundamental. Without right view, the path will never culminate in the ending of suffering. If one adheres to one of the extreme views, eternalism or annihilationism, then the practice is distorted or warped, and one cannot realize nibbana. So that's the beginning of the Eightfold Path in terms of being fundamental, but it's not necessarily the beginning in terms of a time sequence. So all path factors are developed together. So I'll go on next time to deal with um, the ethical path factors. That is right intention, right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So I'll stop there, and we'll see what we have in the chat and by way of questions. Let's see. Uh, see, I'm having trouble with this. Okay. Last week, you recommended that people not sit for longer than an hour and alternate with half an hour of walking. Why I get, I find deeper meditation when I sit longer. Thank you. Um, yeah, you shouldn't take those kind of time frames too rigorously. Like everybody's different. And if you're able to sit for longer than an hour and you're not falling asleep, and you're able to uh, continue to practice in an alert, mindful way, and the meditation's getting deeper, then it's good. And you don't have to stop at an hour. But I think for most people, most of the time, um, trying to push it beyond an hour uh, is counterproductive. You have to judge it by your own experience and your own practice. Venerable Sir, I find an aversion towards parinibbana that disrupts my view and practice because me, I feel like it feels like annihilation. I understand that I is an imaginary concept which does not exist, therefore cannot be annihilated, but the discontinuum of the flux after final death translates to me as not existing. How do I go correcting my view? Yes, that's something that the Buddha actually talked about and addressed, because there are people in his own time who had this fear. They said the Buddha taught annihilation, and he said, I teach annihilation. I teach annihilation of suffering. I teach annihilation of greed, hatred, and delusion." Um, if you the aversion you feel is because you still have a view and an attachment to a self, um, at some level. The more that you transcend that, the uh, the less you will have a fear of nibbana. There's nothing annihilated because there's nothing to begin with to be annihilated. All that ceases is the process of birth and death. Next question. Venerable Ajahn, in meditation, I feel very serene, unified, no disturbance, cool, quiet. Even the object of meditation is not there, but I'm fully aware and awake. Is this jhana? It could be. Can't really diagnose from a brief description on a chat line, but it sounds like it very well could be. I would also say don't be too attached to labels and definitions. It's better just to think in terms of deeper and deeper samadhi, and we call various phases of deep samadhi by the names of first, second, third, and fourth jhana, just as a way of understanding or labeling them. But it's all a continuum of deeper samadhi, and it sounds like a very excellent practice. It sounds like you're definitely doing it right. So I just keep doing that. Are nagas akin to asuras? Are they a kind of lowly dewa? Nagas are classed as part of the animal realm. So they're neither asuras nor devas. They're animals. There's one Jataka story where one of the nagas wants to practice the opposite of vows in order to attain a better rebirth, because he wants to escape this, quote, frog eating animal existence. Is complete view a function of intellectual insight? That's part of it, but not the whole of it. Um, and there's a phrase used in the Sutta Magga that understanding, or no, knowledge is the soil from which understanding grows. That having a cognitive or intellectual understanding can provide the groundwork for a deeper intuitive understanding. That's really the perfect view. Uh, what did the Buddha mean in the mundane view by there is sacrifice, as you read from the sutta? Um, I take it to mean that there is sacrifice in the broader sense of, I think the Pali, if I remember rightly, is yanta, which uh, could be broadened to include like practice in general. So, there is a result of uh, spiritual practice. If you would recommend to go through the Nikayas, which would you start with first? Definitely the Digha. Yeah, it's usually the traditional way to start reading the suttas is with the Digha Nikaya, and then second Majjhima Nikaya, and then after that, depending on your preference and taste. But Bhikkhu Bodhi, in one of his in the introduction to one of his translations, I think maybe the Samyutta, he puts forth an idea of why the suttas are arranged into the Nikayas, and each one has a specific purpose. And he says the Digha Nikaya was the one that was used as kind of the missionary text for to bring people into the Buddhist sasana. Is be the first introduction because it has a few of the most important suttas like the Satipatthana Sutta and Parinibbana Sutta, Brahmajala Sutta, but it also has a lot of narrative material, and it provides a good approach and entry. And then the Majjhima would be for people who are already committed and they're want a deeper study, they want to learn. And the Samyutta is like a graduate level, like much more technical. It approaches Abhidhamma in places. So it would be for more advanced people. And the Anguttara he sees as like a teacher's manual. They have all these lists to give you a way of formalizing the Dhamma. Next question. Would you say that not having a view on rebirth is detrimental to the practice? Some teachers stress it is essential. I would say that it is far better to not have a view than to reject rebirth outright. But I think one has to even get beyond that to get really a deep practice. One has to see things in terms of multiple lifetimes. The whole thing kind of falls apart if you don't see that. One example, probably the key reason would be in deep meditation. If one is approaching a major realization in meditation, and there's this kind of fear of the abyss. Was someone previously had a question about fear of nibbana. It takes a lot of courage to cross that chasm. And if you think this is the only life, and the temptation is strong to retreat and return to ordinary consciousness. But if you see this life as just one in a long, endless, tedious series of constant repetition, the attachment to mundane existence becomes much less. I think that staying on this topic for a moment more, I think for a lot of Westerners who were not raised with the idea of rebirth, when they first encounter the idea, it appeals to them in the thought that, oh, I can live on and on, I can do it again. With it, that's a very partial understanding. It's actually seen, taught by the Buddha, as something terrible and something to be escaped from. Uh, why uh, why fill up the cemeteries again and again? Why pile up your bones into a mountain? You know, if you really contemplate the depth of time you've been wandering, it should give you uh, some wega, some uh, determination to get out of that. Okay, are some next one? Are some people conditioned to see emptiness as self? If so, does that mean that there was a karma that led to that realization? In the sense that could we all today who are here met the Buddha, but that time the conditions were not applicable for us to understand it at that moment? Yeah, I think there's something to that, that we carry over something from our past lives, that we have, if we encounter the Dhamma in this life, it's probably because we've had some connection to it in the past. And some people will have had uh, a pretty deep understanding of Dhamma already, and then when they encounter it in this life, it comes to them very easily. Next one. I is not imaginary. It's a momentary mental factor. I, as imaginary, is nihilism akin to physicalism. What's I is as a conventional mental formation, you know, is one thing. It's kind of an organizing principle, but the idea of not self, the importance is that we don't see that as an ontological or metaphysical reality. Is mindfulness, attention, sati, a sankhara composed of other parts? Uh, no, in Abhidhamma, sati is listed as a shitasaka on its own. Why are the consequences of unwholesome deeds viewed primarily in terms of future life? What about present life? Yeah, this question brings up the differently nuanced presentation in the suttas and in the Abhidhamma about karma. In the Abhidhamma, karma is understood and explained in terms of mind moments, and it's like a balancing of mind moments for every uh, wholesome or kind-hearted deed. In that there'll be a sequence of mind moments that will give profitable or pleasant experiences in future mind moments. And these can occur either in this life or in future lives. When the Buddha, in the suttas, when the Buddha talked about karma, he generally talked about it with a much broader brush and almost always related it to the idea of rebirth and not to specific events either, but this type of behavior will lead to rebirth in the animal realm or the deva realm, etc. So it's like two levels of presentation, two different approaches to the same thing. Some teachers even claim it is impossible to be ethical if you don't believe in rebirth. I don't know if that's 100% true. Like, I have heard this argument back and forth, and um, I have heard people who are, atheist materialists claim that they lead an ethical life. And I'll give them credit to say probably they do. Um, but if one doesn't, what I would say is that if one doesn't have some sense of the consequences of deeds, then the ethical behavior loses one solid foundation. Um, perhaps not the only foundation, but it really unmoors the behavior from the sense of personal results. And it can be quite dangerous. It does open the possibility of living completely unethically. Next one. I recently heard it explained that one leads to another as independent origination, starting with right view, which leads to right speech, ending back to right view, I think, to avoid rote recipe. Yeah, sometimes it is presented in that way, that one builds into the other. And I don't say that that's wrong. I prefer the way the city Magga talks about it, as saying that they're the 8 path factors support one another like 8 strands of a rope, rather than to see them as a ladder. Venerable Sir, I feel I have to be careful when talking of meditative achievements. Even though I like to speak about other meditators, I don't want to invoke jealousy or confusion in others. Yeah, generally it's not. There's not much. You're probably sensible not to talk about it too much. It's not. It can cause confusion, and it really doesn't matter. What you experience is for you. It's important and real for you, but you can't really pass that on directly to another. Is salayatana the equivalent to perception, independent origination? No, salayatana is the 6 sense bases. It's the physical base for sense experience, and then the next step is contact, which is the actual sense experience, which would include perception as part of that process. What do beings like devas, higher beings like devas and brahmas, do in their very long day-to-day life in order to maintain their level of good karma, so they won't just deplete it and fall into lower states of being? That's exactly what happens to many of them. They just fritter away their good karma, and then they take a lower rebirth. It's possible even to fall all the way to hell, but I think it's more normal that deva would just fall to the human level. It's actually not so easy for brahmas and devas to make new good karma. They don't have much opportunity for it. There's they don't have much opportunity for it. There's one story in one of the, I think it's in the Dhammapada commentary, that Saka came down to earth and assumed the form of a poor villager to give alms to the bhikkhus so he could make merit. And Anuruddha, who with the divine eye spotted him and knew he was Saka, and said, "Why are you coming here and taking the place of the other villagers? You should be up in heaven." And Saka said, "Where I live, I don't have much opportunity to make merit. I'm trying to get some merit in here." Next question. I thought Suddhanapada was a better first, as other practitioners of Dutanga take it as a way of life in their journey. Suddhanapada also would be a good place to begin. The traditional thing is to start with Digha Nikaya. Suttanapada would also be an excellent first choice. You've also answered my next, now past questions partly, but I'll leave them. Oh, I think jumped on me, but I'll leave them in without rephrasing them. Okay. I don't see any further questions from you, Dinka, but let's see. Good. Good be understand selflessness properly instead of these idiots who negate persons entirely. I'm not sure. Good be understands. There must be a typo in there. I'm not sure what he's saying. Last week you mentioned that sleep meditation is a good practice for death. What source do you recommend for further reading and practice? Does Theravada have established practices? Um, yeah. Uh, I'm trying to think. In Theravada, there's really not much directly on that topic. Um, I don't know of any one good source for it. In Tibetan Buddhism, there's Sogyal Rinpoche's book of living and dying. That's actually got some good stuff on sleep meditation, but from the Tibetan Buddhist side. Why would one want to be reborn in Brahma realm if the opportunities of enlightenment are poor, or are they? Um, well, the opportunities for further enlightenment in the Brahma realm are not necessarily so good. It's still possible. Some Brahmas attain to higher states, but uh, being born there would be just as a result of good karma, just to, just to have a a long, highly pleasant existence. But it's not the end of the journey. There's a story about one Thai Ajahn who had a had a student who said he didn't want to practice jhana because it could lead to rebirth as a Brahma. And Ajahn said, "What's wrong with that? Would you rather be reborn as a dog?" Ajahn Nisarano helpful describe right view as right for enlightenment rather than being an epistological term. I found this helpful. Yeah, okay. Where in Buddhist cosmology do planetary deities reside? Exactly. Um, I've not found any reference to planetary deities other than the sun and moon. Um, the um, the sun and moon were seen as abodes of deities, and there's like the whole a multitude of deities that live in the sun and in the moon. But there's one chief, the who's kind of identified with the sun and the moon, the king or the chief of that level. There isn't in the Theravadan cosmological descriptions. There's almost nothing about the other planets. They're very neglected. There's almost nothing about them. Uh, what is your thoughts on a person who doesn't want to take medicine and says that all are because results of previous life karma, and that bad karma ends regardless of medicine? It will end. I think it's kind of a foolish approach. Like part of your karma would be to be born into a place and time where you have access to medicine, and in the Buddhist time, the the monks were given advice in the Vinaya on different medicines they could take. So I don't think abstaining from medicine because you just want to live your past karma. It sounds kind of foolish. It becomes a kind of self mortification. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up for now, and next week we'll be dealing with the ethical path factors. So carry on. I hope you all have a good week, and thank you for coming.